Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz singer and songwriter Sally Terrell. She opened up about her second solo outing, the 2022 CD Feel Alive. On this new album, she blends originals with fresh, timely takes on a half dozen standards, capturing the ethos of this strange and profound cultural moment. She began a lifelong love affair with the piano and singing at the age of 6. Then after building a career as a college writing teacher, she began singing professionally when her husband formed the Green Jazz Band. Whether serenading audiences in English, French, or Portuguese, her interpretations are full of good and surprise and joy these stories.
So let's dive in here with the new album. And, it's Feel Alive, and it's coming out, during this time where hopefully the world's waking up. My question is, how does it feel to have new material coming out right now? Kind of the general feeling of this release for you.
Well, it feels wonderful to have it out. I'll say that as a starting point. And the songs themselves, for me, even though they're about coming out of the pandemic, certainly Feel Alive was coming from that place. Some of the other originals really came from the sort of darker moments of the early part of the pandemic in 2020. And so when I hear the album now, I'm excited to have brought it over the finish line with these great musicians. And at the same time, it brings me back in a way. So I just hope that for other people listening to it, it resonates on both levels, both a reminder of where we've been and hopefully some optimism about where we're going.
So what are you hoping the listener ultimately gets from this album?
Just that, I suppose, a sense of optimism coming out of the resilience of where we've been. I mean, songs like Lights and Sirens, Beautiful, sort of remind us that we're deeply mired in these sort of social justice issues right now, even as these other crazy things are now starting to happen elsewhere in the world. And the other songs, the jazz standards and the originals, sort of remind us that the human spirit endures, So it's sort of a mixed bag of emotions in the album. And I just hope the listener feels a sense of connection with each set of emotions in the songs. Yeah, basically that.
So, over this time of COVID quarantine, what did you learn about yourself that maybe you didn't realize before that's going to make you just that much stronger as you promote this new material?
I don't think I'm alone in saying that I discovered what it would be like to be in the four walls of your home, involuntarily for an extended period of time, finding out where your brain goes, where your mind goes, how much more vulnerable I felt to some of the sort of daily things that we were hearing through headlines and news outlets. And I think what I learned about myself was that I could, in fact, muster a sense of all will be well, muster a sense of resilience, muster a sense of inner peace. And frankly, music and writing music was the thing that I learned I could do as a way to sort of cope with all of that and to make sense out of it. I've been writing my whole life and I've been singing my whole life, but I've never really put the songwriting to work in the way that I did during the pandemic. And so I think I learned about myself that creative outlet was really meaningful for me and that it was a way to connect with other people.
So you, as you mentioned, you've been at this for quite a while, and I'm curious, how did specifically, jazz become a part of your life and become what you pursued in life?
Well, it's interesting. I grew up in a musical household. My dad was a classically trained pianist. He was enlisted in the Marine Corps, and right before he went off to Korea, I later learned from his buddies that he performed Rhapsody in Blue for these guys before they all shipped off to Korea. He had then gone to Annapolis. He made a lot of friends in the Corps, and music was a way he expressed himself. He was gravely wounded in the war. He came back with, as an amputee and with a lot of shrapnel wounds and a lot of mental wounds. So even though growing up in our house, it was a pretty tough situation. He ended up leaving, and I was raised by a single mom. The music was always there, and I also was a beneficiary of a great public school system where, starting from the fourth grade, we were listening to all kinds of music, performing all kinds of music. I didn't realize until much later in life just how fortunate I was to have that public school education. Jazz was part of that. Classical music was part of that. Certainly my dad filled the house with, jazz, classical music, and my siblings were all musical. So carrying that forward, it was just always a part of me. I did end up teaching as my primary career because my mother insisted on something fairly practical. So it wasn't until, I would say, about 12 years ago, it was actually when I met my husband, and he had a band and asked me if I would sing with them, that we, initially it was a cover band, but we immediately started focusing on jazz. And it really just all grew from there. And so in the last 12 years, I've just made myself a student of everything I can learn about the form and about the history. I've been lucky enough to work with Giacomo Gates. He lives here in Connecticut. Through my work with him, really just studying stories and people and style, and of course in the singing, just practicing the integrity of the music and figuring out what story I'm in as I sing those things. So it's a second chapter for me, and I probably don't have enough years to learn everything I can about the form, but that's, to me, this is an exciting time. I'm really putting to use things that have been always there for me, and just trying to be a good student of jazz to perform the music in a way that's both authentic and meaningful.
What was the first live jazz show you saw that really, really made you think, wow, I'd love to do that?
Oh, that's a good question. We have a lot of great venues here in Connecticut, and interestingly, it goes all the way back to the Litchfield Jazz Festival, the Newport Jazz Festival. I can think of a million. I've been going to concerts and festivals for forever. I suppose, interestingly, it was Diana Krall who, because she both plays piano and sings, and at that time, when I was picking up the music, I in my band here locally with the Green Jazz Band. That's my husband's and my band. I play piano and sing, and so I think I was really blown away by her ability to do both things. I remember seeing Dina DeRose at Litchfield, and she, was scatting to her own piano solos, and I thought that was super cool. So there've been a few performances that have blown me away, but so many of the people that I consider early influences, Sarah Vaughan and Ella Fitzgerald, we're watching these things on YouTube, really. But live, I guess it was those women who were playing piano and singing at the same time.
So what about mentors? Who would you consider mentors, a mentor that really helped you get to where you're at today?
That's Giacomo. I was playing with the Green Jazz Band for about 5 years when someone suggested to me that I really focus on the vocals and just see where I could go with that. And so I immediately started looking for someone, and he was both local and well recommended. And, Giacomo's a hard bopper who, has a lot of, he's a walking storybook, really. And he had all kinds of stories to tell about how he felt the music was well done. He told me a million stories about John Hendricks and Sheila Jordan, Abby Lincoln, just people that he admired. And I suppose those influences of his rubbed off on me, not because I'm a bopper, but because he was talking about this integrity of the music and reminded me that I needed to know what story I was in, and that really informed my understanding of phrasing. And he's just beyond the sort of technique elements. He's given me a lot of context, and he's just a really good all-around coach in terms of understanding the business, which is the part you don't really want to think about all that much. But when I was starting to get solo gigs and bigger festivals, I came to him with those questions because I'm coming to this so late in life. So he's just been incredible, all-around mentor for me, and I'm super grateful to him.
So what do you like the best about being a professional musician? What's the part of it that you enjoy the most?
That's got to be just being in the moment with the audience. To me, if I'm not there because I'm connecting with them, then it's not worth it. And that goes back to my earliest sense of, I was a super shy kid in elementary and middle school, and the very first time I landed a play was the lead in Oliver, of all things. And I was a super shy kid singing this solo in front of a couple hundred people in an auditorium, and I just remember the way that moved people and moved my friends. And ever since then, it's just been about bringing joy to people. My local band, some of our favorite gigs are with the retirement communities in the area because, all those folks know the words. They know the music, and they get a lot of joy out of it. And then with some of these other shows, I just go for that same feel. So the joy of performing for me is just all about connection with people,
And we've been away from it largely for 2 years now. So my question is, what do you hope we all realize collectively, musician and the audience, about the power of live music when we hopefully start getting back more in earnest as the year moves along?
That's a good question, too. I mean, I've just been to a few shows in the last few months. It felt very risky to be out when Omicron was front and center. We chose to go to a show on New Year's Eve. It was actually Samara Joy. I know you've interviewed her. She's so fabulous. We saw her at the Side Door in Connecticut, and it's a great jazz venue, small jazz venue in Connecticut. And she was commenting on this at the show, and in the few shows I've seen since then, that we're just so hungry for in-person connection. Like I was just saying, it's this idea that you can listen to a recording and have a private experience, and that can be very meaningful. But when you're among other people, and especially with jazz, which is so rooted in improvisation, when you're sitting there as an audience member, taking in something that is being made right in front of you with that moment and that context in mind, I just don't think there's anything else like it. And as a performer, we've only done a few local shows, and I'll be opening the Lewiston Jazz Festival in my hometown of Lewiston, New York in August. And what I'm most looking forward to with that kind of a big show, where there'll be a lot of friends and family as well as other people, is just saying we're back. Music is sort of this glue that binds us, right? It's in a time, and this is central to the album, in a time of suffering and division and, a lot of concern about myriad issues in the culture. It's like, this is what brings us together. We can all experience a song and be together in that one moment in time, So to me, it all comes back to that human connection. I can't wait to get back to some of these, to some of the bigger venues and some of the bigger shows, and even the ones we're doing now that are smaller in scope. They're just magical. They bring a lump to your throat, truly, right? Just to be with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. So everyone has a perception of you. They have an idea of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your fans. But ultimately, you live your life. You have a perception of you. Who do you think you are?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a good one. To me, it's an interesting question only because I'm coming out of this chapter in my life where I've spent 32 years in higher education. I've been really lucky to work with community college students for most of that time. And so who I was, I'm certainly not only defined by my professional role, but the idea of bringing students along a journey was central to my life for so many years. And as I prepare to leave that, I'm leaving that career full-time in just a couple of months and entering this other chapter of my life, fully devoting my energy to music. I think it's going to be musician, obviously, as a professional role, but I think there's a common denominator to all of it, and it's always just been, the person I am is just interested in bringing joy where I can and being true to myself as both a person and a musician. And so the who I think I am, I guess, is just a mostly joyful. I mean, in the private moments, right, like everyone else in the pandemic, I can be as despairing and kind of down as the rest of us. But generally speaking, I just think I'm a joyful person who loves to connect with other people. And I suppose if you ask most performers, they're going to talk about that idea of just loving to be around an audience and just generally, not even performing, just being around other people, because I get my energy from other people's ideas and other people's joy. So that's a long-winded answer to a question, but that's the best I can do.
No, I think that's great. That's a great way, kind of a triumphant way to wrap it all up. Sally, thank you for taking some time out. Good luck with the album and the return to the stage. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Joe. Okay, have a great day.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest singers and players in Connecticut, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Sally for her time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Lights and sounds. Neon Jazz.